You will look at me when I am speaking to you, or I shall have you turned out into the yard with the dogs." The voice came down the length of the flagged hall at Renfold, and the Duke of Brandeston, standing in the open doorway with the rain still ticking off the shoulders of his coat, saw exactly what it struck. A woman knelt at the foot of the stairs with a cloth in her hand and a pail beside her, scrubbing away a long brown smear of river mud. She did not look up. She went on with the cloth, steady, unhurried, working the mud out of the stone in small patient circles, and it was that steadiness, more than the voice, that held him where he stood. "Do you hear me?" Lady Wynne came another 3 steps. She was a tall, dry woman in grey silk, and she spoke to the back of the kneeling woman's head. Sullen and stupid, and I have fed her 32 years for the privilege. She cannot hear you, aunt. A young man lounged against the newel post, examining his own cuff, not from behind. It is her great convenience. It is her great insolence. The kneeling woman finished the last of the mud, sat back on her heels, and looked round then, calmly, without haste, and the Duke saw her face for the first time, not young, not old. A plain, clear, watchful face, and eyes that went straight to the mouth of whoever was speaking, as though a mouth were a thing to be read rather than merely heard. "The mud is off," she said. "It came in on Mr. Hollis's boots at 11, and it will come in again at 4, unless he leaves them at the scullery door." Hollis Vane stopped examining his cuff. Lady Wynne's colour rose. "You art asked to speak." "No, ma'am," the woman agreed, and wrung out the cloth. It would be a full year before the Duke of Brandeston understood that he had come into that hall, asked for the woman's name, and then gone away and quietly given her another, exactly as every man in the county had done before him, and that the setting of it right would cost him his pride, publicly, in front of a vestry room of people who had never once looked at her. He came in out of the doorway. The butler had bolted for the drawing room and was somewhere behind him, bleating about the Duke of Brandeston, the Duke of Brandeston, and Lady Wynne turned with her whole face changing, becoming warm and smooth as poured cream, and her hands already out. "Your Grace, forgive us. We looked for you tomorrow. This is my nephew, Mr. Hollis Vane, who has the management of Renfold entirely, and my daughters are." In a moment, Brandeston walked past the outstretched hands. He crossed the hall to the foot of the stairs. He did not stand over the woman, and he did not speak to the back of her head. He came round to her right side deliberately, until he was where she could see him, and then he waited until she had risen and set the pail down and was looking at him. "Your name, madam," he said. "I will have it first." Behind him, the silence had a texture to it. The woman's hands were red from the water. She held them still. "Susanna, Your Grace." "Susanna what?" "Kell." A small pause. "It is the name they give me." "Then it is the name I shall use." He inclined his head to her, precisely as he would have to a marchioness, and turned. "Now, ma'am, your nephew and your daughters." Lady Wynne's smile had gone rigid on her face, and she managed the introductions like a woman reciting through a mouthful of gravel. He had come for the cottages, that was all. 6 weeks earlier a letter had arrived at Brandeston, unsigned, written in a small upright hand on the blank half of a corn factor's bill, and it had told him, plainly, with figures, without one word of flattery, that the stream feeding the Renfold water meadows had been turned in the spring to fill an ornamental lake, that 11 cottages below the mill now stood in standing water, 2 families had the marsh fever, and that the Brandeston estate, which held the mortgage on Renfold and would hold the land itself within the year, might wish to know what it was buying. He had read that letter 11 times. He had ridden 90 miles on the strength of it. "You will forgive the state of us," Hollis was saying at dinner, spreading his hands. "The books are a labour. I sit at them till 2 in the morning, Your Grace, and my aunt will tell you I am hardly fit for company by Sunday." "Your hand is very fine," said Brandeston. "Kind of you. I have seen it." He watched the young man over the rim of his glass. "Somebody at Renfold writes an uncommon clear figure." "Ah," Hollis smiled. "Guilty." At the far end of the table, where nobody was looking, a serving woman set down a dish of parsnips. Nobody thanked her. Nobody moved to make room. Talk went straight over the place where she stood, and she went out again through the green baize door, and the Duke found that he had turned his head to watch her go. Later, in the cold gallery, he stopped the housekeeper. Mrs. Tapp was 70 if she was a day and had a face like a walnut. The woman Kell, he said. What are her wages? Mrs. Tapp looked at the floor. She has none, your grace. None. She has her keep. She was left here as a girl. There was a fever, and after it she was deaf on the left side, and her ladyship said no household would take a deaf girl, and it was charity to keep her. The old woman's mouth worked. She is on no book. She has no character to show, and never a shilling paid, so there is nothing to write in a character. She cannot be turned off, your grace, and she cannot leave. A woman with no wages has no name to give a new master, and a woman with no name is a vagrant on the road. The rain held off in the morning, and Brandeston walked down to the mill with Hollis Vane, talking the whole way. The cottages were worse than the letter had said. Water lay grey and flat in the lane, ankle-deep with a scum of chaff on it. A woman in the third doorway had a face the colour of tallow. Somebody was coughing behind a shutter, steadily, the way a person coughs who has been at it for a month. A wet spring, said Hollis. Devilish wet spring. The spring was dry. Brandeston did not look at him. I rode through it. Where does that ditch go? Which ditch? The one that has been dammed with clay and faced with stone at some expense, and is not on any plan I have seen. Hollis laughed. It was not a good laugh. They went up to the house and into the estate room, and the books were brought, and for 2 hours the Duke turned pages while Hollis stood at his shoulder and explained things that did not want explaining. The entries were beautiful. Small, upright, unwavering, every column footed, every doubtful sum queried in the margin with a neat penciled cross. You keep a handsome book, Brandeston said. One does what one can. What was the cost of the lake? The lake. Hollis's hand went to his cravat. A trifle. 200, I should think. 200 and something. The door had opened. Susanna Kell came in with a coal scuttle, went to the grate and knelt. It was £1,140, 6 shillings, without turning round, and the ditching was another 90, and it is entered in 3 places under drainage, which is where your grace will not find it, because it drained nothing. The fire took the coal with a small sound. Nobody else made any. Hollis went white to the lips. You will get out. Stay where you are, said Brandeston. She stayed. She had not risen from the hearth, and she went on setting the coals, one and then another, as though the room were empty. Miss Kell. He rose and came round the desk, round to her right, again, without thinking about it now, and crouched so that his face was level with hers. Say that again. She looked at his mouth, and then at his eyes, and something in her seemed to weigh whether it was worth the price. £1,140, 6 shillings, she said. There is a bill from a Bristol man for the stone. It is folded into the back of the 89 book, under the marbled paper. It was folded there so that nobody would carry it to the fire by accident. And who folded it there? Somebody who could not afford to be found holding it, she said, and could not afford for it to be lost. He held her eyes for a moment. Then he stood and crossed the room, and took the 89 book off the shelf and turned it up and slid 2 fingers under the marbled end paper. The bill came out. Hollis Vane did not stay for the reading of it. That afternoon Brandeston walked the sluice himself in the rain and came back with his boots ruined, and found Lady Wynne waiting in the hall with her 2 daughters arranged on the stairs like china. You must not be imposed upon, your grace, she said. The creature has a spite. She has always had a spite. She was clever once, as a girl, before the fever, and she has never been reconciled to what she is. What is she? Lady Wynne blinked. She is nothing, your grace. That is not cruelty. It is only the fact. She has no family, no fortune, no. She has a name. She has a name we gave her. He was very still. Then somebody had a great deal of trouble to take over nothing. At dinner Susanna Kell was not in the room. He asked for her and was told, with a delicacy that made his teeth ache, that she took her food in the still room standing, and had done for 20 years. He found her there at 9 o'clock with a tallow candle on a tray, and a slate on her knee. She stood up when he came in. He saw her hand move over the slate once as though to cover it. Sit, he said. It is your room, not mine. It is nobody's room, your grace. Then we are both trespassers. He set his shoulder against the doorpost. How do you know the price of the stone? I paid it. You. I write the orders and I write the receipts, and I carry them to Mr. Vane to sign, she said. He signs. Then he reads them out at dinner as though he had thought of them. She said it without heat. That was the worst of it, without any heat at all. It is not a complaint. A person must be of some use, or she is only an expense, and an expense can be got rid of. You could have written to me, plainly, with your name on it. Something crossed her face and was gone, and he could not read it. A letter with my name on it, she said, would not have been answered. How do you know? Because I have written a great many, your grace, over 32 years to a great many people, to the parish, to the bishop's registrar at Marlow, to a lawyer in Chancery Lane who returned mine unopened with the postage owing. She turned the slate face down. One learns. Words are cheap and paper is not. He went back through the dark house with a candle, and up to the estate room, and stood a long while with the door shut. Then he took out his pocket-book, and out of the pocket-book the letter, the unsigned letter on the back of a corn factor's bill, that had brought him 90 miles, and laid it flat on the desk beside the 89 ledger, open at March, smart, unwavering. The same odd narrow S, the same penciled cross in the margin where a sum was doubtful. The Duke of Brandeston sat down slowly in the estate room chair, and looked from the one to the other, and understood that for 6 weeks he had been riding to the summons of a woman whose name nobody in that house had thought worth telling him. You will want the 87 book as well, she said, 3 days later, if you mean to do it properly. I mean to do it properly. Then you will want 85. Susanna Kell set the 2 volumes on the desk and squared them. The lake was talked of for 4 years before it was dug. A thing that is talked of for 4 years is not a whim, your grace. It is a plan. He had given up pretending he would leave on Thursday. He had written to Brandeston for his own steward and his own attorney, and he had taken the estate room for his own. And every morning at 8 the woman with no wages came in with the coal and stayed to work, because he had asked her to and because, he suspected, she had wanted for 32 years to be asked. He learned things by watching. He learned that she sat always with her right side to the room, and that when 2 people spoke at once she lost both, and that she never once said so. He learned to stop the second speaker himself mildly as a matter of his own preference. He learned that she read a face as other people read a printed page, and that she had therefore known Hollis Vane was lying for 11 years, and had written it down. You might tell me when you cannot hear, he said once. Why? So that I might say it again. She looked at him for a moment as though he had spoken in Greek. People do not say it again, she said. They say it louder, and then they say it to somebody else. I am not people. No, your grace, she said. You are worse. You are somebody who will be gone in a fortnight, and afterwards it is a very long way back down. He did not have an answer to that. He found he thought about it at 2 in the morning. The door, such as it was all on his side. He brought her a lamp, a proper argan lamp with a chimney, because she had been ruining her eyes for 2 decades on tallow, and she thanked him gravely and used it, and gave it back to the housekeeper's cupboard every night, so that nobody could say she had taken anything. He asked her to walk the sluice with him, and she came and named every field they crossed, and the year of every hedge. Kell, he said. It is a Marlow name. Is it? There are Kells in the parish book at Marlow. I looked. He watched the side of her face. You were not born a Kell. I was born, she said, which is more than the parish book will tell you. At the top of the sluice she stopped and put her hand on the stone, and the rain had stopped and the light came sideways under the cloud, and for a moment she looked so entirely at home in that wet green country that he could not imagine the county without her in it. Then Michaelmas came into the house. Lady Wynne announced it at dinner on the Friday in the voice of a woman conferring a favour. We are to be reduced, your grace. It is no shame. Half the county is reduced. Mr. Vane goes to his cousin at Bath. The girls and I take a house at Marlow. She patted her lips with her napkin. The household is given notice from Michaelmas Day. That is the 29th, 3 weeks and Renfold shuts. And Miss Kell? Kell. Lady Wynne's fork paused. Kell is not household. Kell has no wages and no place, and there is nothing to give her notice of. She will go to the parish. The room went on eating. The parish, Brandeston repeated. The overseers at Marlow are very good. There is the workhouse at Nettlebridge, quite clean, I am told. It is what becomes of women like that, your grace, and it is not unkindness to say so. It is arithmetic. She keeps your arithmetic. She keeps a book, said Lady Wynne, as a horse keeps to a road. He set down his glass carefully, because his hand wanted to do something else with it. Ma'am, he said, you have lived 32 years beside a woman who saved 11 of your families from drowning in their own lane, and you have never once found out her name. Her name is Kell. It is not, he said, and you know it is not, and I begin to think that is the only thing in this house you have taken any trouble over. Lady Wynne's face closed like a purse. He found Susanna afterwards in the still room, doing what she did every night of her life, entering the day. He stood in the doorway until she saw him. You are to go to the workhouse at Nettlebridge on the 29th, he said. He had decided, on the stairs, that she should hear it from a mouth she could read, and not from the back of a head in a passage. She did not flinch. She finished the line she was writing and blotted it. Yes, she said, I have known it since the spring. It is why I wrote to you. Then let me know. Just that. Quiet, flat, and complete. Your Grace, in 3 weeks I shall be a woman of 32 with no wages, no character, no settlement in any parish that will own me, and no name on any register in England. Everything else can be borne. That last cannot, and it cannot be mended by anybody's kindness. It can only be mended by a fact. What fact? That is my business. Miss Kell, 29th of September, she said, and closed the book on her thumb. That is what you may write in your ledger, your Grace. Everything at Renfold now has a date on it, even me. Sit on my left, he said, at the beginning of the 2nd week. I have been putting you on my right for a fortnight, and it is the wrong side for the fire. Susanna looked up from the 85 book. It is the wrong side for me. It is not, if I sit on your right. He moved the chair round the desk himself, which no duke in the county had done for 30 years, and set it down and sat in it. There. Now you have the fire and I have the draught, and we may both be uncomfortable in the proper places. She laughed. It was the first time, and it astonished him. It was not a lady's laugh. It came out of her in a short, surprised gust, like something let off a chain, and she put her hand over her mouth immediately as if to catch it and put it back. Do that again, he said. Certainly not. They worked till 1 in the morning. The Bristol bill had opened a seam, and the seam ran everywhere. Money for a drain that was a lake, timber for a barn that was a summer house. £400 of Brandeston mortgage interest paid out of a rent that had never been collected, because the tenants had no roofs, he read. She found. He would name a year and she would go to the shelf without looking, because she had shelved them all. At midnight she brought bread and cold beef, and they ate it off the ledger's blotting paper, and he asked her what she would have been. A clerk, she said promptly, in a counting house. Somewhere with a great many windows, not a wife, not a house of your own. Your Grace, I have never once been asked my name twice by the same person. She turned the crust in her fingers. One does not build a house on a foundation like that, but figures do not care whether they are liked. Figures come out the same for everybody. There is a great deal of comfort in a thing that comes out the same for everybody. The candle guttered. He watched her hands, which were red and square and quick, and thought that he had sat at better tables and been more poorly fed. Miss Kell, he said, when this is done, do not. She said it gently. Please. It is a good evening. Let it be only that. He carried it about with him for 3 days like a coal in his pocket. And then, being a man who had spent 19 years solving other people's difficulties with money and consequence, hid the thing that ruined it. The attorney came out from Marlow on the Tuesday, and the drawing-room was full. Lady Wynne, her 2 daughters, Hollisvane down from his sulk, the attorney, and Mrs. Tapp by the door with the tea. Brandeston had the papers in his hand and the whole county's satisfaction in his chest. Before we come to the mortgage, he said, there is a smaller matter. Ma'am, you will not be troubled about your dependent. I have executed a deed, £40 a year to the woman Kell on the Brandeston estate, for her life, and a room at the lodge and coals. She need not go to Nettlebridge. She need not shift for herself at all. He heard how it sounded a half-second after he had said it, the way a man hears the ice. How very good of your Grace, said Lady Wynne, delighted. You see, Kell, You are provided for. It is quite proper, Hollis said, warming. A creature in her condition, deaf, and no connections, could not be expected to make her own way. Your Grace has been more than just. That is not what £40. Lady Wynne was laughing now, and the daughters laughed because she did. Do you hear it, Kell? £40 a year and coals for scrubbing my hall. There is not a cook in this county so paid. And to think you were sullen with me on Friday. Susanna stood by the door with the tea things in her hands. She had not been asked into the room. She had come in with the tray because the tray had to come in, and now she stood in the middle of a conversation about herself, conducted over her head, in the presence of people who had never once addressed her by name, and every single one of them was looking at her at last, as a subject. As an item that had been settled, she looked at Brandeston, only for a moment. He had spent a fortnight learning to come round to her right side so that she might see a face when it spoke to her, and he had just discussed her whole life across a room with her back half turned, and had not thought to ask her one question about any of it. Your Grace is very kind, she said. I will fetch the hot water. She went out. The door made no sound at all, which was somehow worse than if she had slammed it. He found her nowhere that night. Not the still room, not the estate room, not the kitchen passage. Mrs. Tapp, when he ran her down at last by the linen press, would not look at him, and the old woman's hands shook on the sheets. You have shamed her, Your Grace. I have secured her. You have priced her. Mrs. Tapp folded a corner down, savagely. £40 and coals in front of them that fed her on scraps for 32 years, so they may go to Bath telling everyone how handsome the Duke was to the deaf drudge. She has been called a great many things in this house, but she was never yet a charity in public, and now she is one forever, and it was you that did it. He stood in the cold passage with the candle burning down over his knuckles. He did not sleep. At 5:30 he was at the window of the estate room, and the yard below was blue with early light, and there was a lamp burning in the gable under the roof where the maids did not sleep because no maid was housed there. It burned all the while he watched it. At 6 the Marlow carrier came into the yard for the churn. Mrs. Tapp went out to him in her shawl, and put 3 folded papers into his hand, and said something, and the carrier touched his hat, and put them inside his coat. Brandeston went down. By the time he reached the yard the cart was through the gate. 3 letters, he said. Yes, Your Grace. To whom? Mrs. Tapp looked at him a long moment, and there was nothing unkind in her face, which made it worse. She did not say, Your Grace, the old woman answered, and I did not ask her, because it is the one thing in this world that is hers. She is gone, Your Grace. Mrs. Tapp said on the morning of the 29th. Walked out at 4 with a bundle. Marlow Road. It was 11 miles to Marlow. He had the grey saddled and was on the road in 9 minutes, and he still came into the town behind her, because she had had 6 hours and had not stopped. Michaelmas Day at Marlow filled the square, the hiring stalls, the geese, the cattle standing in their own steam, and the vestry room over the church porch, where the parish did its business once a quarter, rates, roads, and the poor. Brandeston left the grey with a boy and went up the worn stone stair with his heart going like a colt's, and the room was already packed and hot. Farmers, the overseers, the rector, and Lady Wynne in grey silk in the second row with Hollis beside her. Because a family leaving a parish must settle its accounts with it. Susanna Kell stood at the clerk's table in a brown stuff gown with mud to the knee. Nobody had given her a chair. The woman Kell, no settlement proved, the overseer was reading, to be removed to the house at Nettlebridge this day. Before you remove me, she said, I have 3 things to lay before the vestry, and then you may do as you please. Somebody at the back laughed. The rector said mildly that the vestry would hear her. Brandeston stopped in the doorway. Every instinct in him said to go down the room and stand beside her, and let the county see whose hand was on the back of her chair. She had not asked him. She had walked 11 miles in the dark rather than ask him. He stayed where he was in the door with his hat in his hands, and it was the hardest hour of his life. The first. She laid a paper on the clerk's table. A deed of annuity, £40, executed by the Duke of Brandeston in my favour on the 17th. I return it unaccepted. Let the vestry note that it was offered, and that it was declined, and that I am therefore chargeable to nobody in this room by reason of any gift, The clerk's pen stopped. You refuse £40 a year. I refuse to be a kindness, she said. I have been 32 years on kindness, and I have come out of it with no wages, no character, and no name. I will not be paid for again. Write it down. He wrote it down. A second paper, thicker, tied with tape, the Renfold rents and disbursements for 11 years, entered in my hand, footed by me with the vouchers. The vestry will find in it £380 a poor rate charged to the parish for cottages that stood in water, because the mill stream was turned in the spring of the year 21 to fill a lake. The parish has been paying to keep alive the families that Renfold drowned. I make no accusation of any person. The figures make it. They come out the same for everybody. The room's noise changed. Lady Wynne rose halfway and was told to sit. The third, Susanna said, is a request. It is the only thing I have ever asked this parish for. Name it, said the rector. That the register be brought out, the marriage book for the year 89 and the baptism book for 90, and that they be opened here, in front of the vestry, and not by me. Let the clerk turn the pages. Let no one say I touched them. The rector looked at the overseers. The overseers looked at each other, and one of them, an old farmer with a face like a saddle, said, "Fetch 'em." They were 4 minutes in the fetching. Nobody in that hot room spoke. Brandeston, in the doorway, understood that he was watching a woman collect on 32 years, alone in a brown gown, with mud to her knee and no protector anywhere in the room, and that if he took one step forward he would take it away from her forever. The clerk brought the 2 books and set them down and opened the marriage register at the year 89 and put his finger on the page and stopped. "There is an entry struck through here," he said. "Read what's under it. It is scored out. It is scored out very heavy, with a knife under it as well. The paper is thinned. Hold it to the window," said Susanna Kell. The clerk carried the book to the tall window where the September sun came in yellow and hard through the dust, and held the page up, and the whole vestry room turned to look at the light coming through it. You could see the letters. Scraped and inked over and gone, and still there, the way a thing that has happened is always still there. A marriage solemnized in that parish on the 4th of May, in the year 89, between Thomas Renfold of Renfold, bachelor, and Anne Kell, spinster of this parish, 2 witnesses. And in the baptism book, 11 months after, struck through with the same knife, in the same heavy hand, Susanna. "Thomas Renfold was my father," she said, into a silence you could have stood a spoon in. "He died at sea in the year 92, and his sister came to the house and kept me in it, and I have scrubbed the hall of my father's house for 32 years, and nobody in this county ever asked me my name but once, and he asked it a fortnight ago." She did not look at the doorway. "The register has been in this church the whole time, 6 feet from where you christen your own. Not one of you ever thought to look, because nobody looks at me, and I could not open it myself, because a woman with no name may not be believed, and a woman who is not believed had better not touch the paper." Lady Wynne had got to her feet. Her mouth was open and nothing was coming out of it. "That is all," said Susanna. "You may remove me to Nettlebridge now, if the vestry still finds it convenient." "It does not find it convenient," said the Duke of Brandeston from the door. The room turned. He came up the middle of it, and he did not go to her side, because he had not earned that. He stopped 3 feet short at the clerk's table and faced the vestry. "You know who I am. I hold the mortgage on Renfold, and I shall hold the land in November, and I have therefore no business speaking in this parish's meeting, so I ask leave." "Granted," said the rector, faintly. "Then I shall begin with myself, since I am the worst of it." He set his hat down on the clerk's table. 12 days ago, in the drawing-room of that house, in front of the people who had used her hardest, I settled £40 a year on this lady without asking her one question. I called it providing for her. I meant it kindly, which is no defence at all. Every soul in this county has spent 32 years deciding what she is and telling her afterwards, and when my turn came I did exactly the same thing, only with a lawyer, and I did it after she had trusted me with the only power she had. She wrote to me in the spring. Unsigned, because a name of no consequence is not answered. 11 cottages under water, 2 houses of marsh fever, and the figures to prove it. I rode 90 miles on that letter and let another man take the credit at my own dinner table for 3 weeks, because he was standing up and she was carrying in the coals. Hollis Vane had begun edging along the row. "Sit down, Mr. Vane," Brandeston said, without turning his head. "The Bristol bill is in my attorney's hands, with the drainage entries you signed and did not write, and your aunt's instruction of the 14th of March, 21, to turn the mill stream. There are 11 families in this parish who will want the money that has been paid out of their poor rate. You will find it easier to give it back than to explain it." "Your Grace," said Lady Wynne, in a voice like a hinge, "you cannot mean to creditor servants." "Ma'am." He looked at her then, and she stopped. "You struck a page out of a parish register. You have lived 32 years in a house that was not yours, and kept your brother's daughter in the scullery of it, and told her nightly that she was nothing, and I think you did it because a girl who has been told she is nothing does not go to a lawyer." It very nearly answered. "It failed for one reason only. She is cleverer than the whole of you, and she wrote everything down." He turned to the vestry and put both hands flat on the clerk's table. "The parish will be repaid to the last shilling of that £380 out of the Brandeston estate this week, and I shall recover it from Renfold at my leisure. The cottages will be rebuilt on dry ground before the frost. My own men come Thursday. The register will go to the bishop's registrar at Marlow with this vestry's certificate of what it saw in that window today, and the entry will be restored, and the annuity is withdrawn." The clerk's pen faltered. "Withdrawn, Your Grace, entirely." He straightened. "One does not settle £40 a year on the owner of the estate. Renfold was her father's, and it descends to her, and everything I have called charity for 12 days has in fact been her own money, badly kept by other people. That is not generosity. It is arithmetic, and I am told it comes out the same for everybody." Somewhere at the back a farmer began to laugh, and then the room was full of noise, and Lady Wynne went out of it by the side stair with her daughters, and did not come back to that county again. Brandeston waited until it was quiet. Then he did the only thing he had done right in the whole business, and he did it again properly. He came round the clerk's table to her right side, where she could see his face, and he took off nothing and offered nothing and simply stood so that she might read him. "Madam," he said, "your name. I will have it first." The whole vestry heard her give it. "Susanna Renfold." "Then it is the name I shall use," said the Duke of Brandeston, "and I shall use it every day I am spared, if you will let me, and if you will not, I shall use it anyway, in this room and every other, until there is not a soul in this county who does not know it." She looked at him for a long moment in the yellow window light, with the register still open behind her. "You may begin," she said, "by saying it before the geese are sold, because I am extremely hungry, and I have walked 11 miles. They were married at Marlow in the spring, in the church that held the mended register, with the rector reading and 11 families from the Mill Lane filling the back of it in their best coats. She kept her father's name in the parish book beside her new one, and the bishop's registrar came out himself to see it written. A year later, at Brandeston, the estate room had 2 desks in it. Hers stood at the window where the light was best. With an argand lamp she did not give back to any cupboard at night, and the room was arranged so that whoever came in on her right, and no one at that house had ever thought this strange, because the Duke had explained it once, plainly, to every servant on the day she arrived, and had then never mentioned it again. She kept the Brandeston books. It shocked several counties. The books had never been better kept. There is a query in the margin, he said one wet November evening, leaning over her shoulder. There is a penciled cross, said his wife, which means the sum is doubtful, which means your steward has bought oats twice, which means you will speak to him kindly on Thursday. I shall speak to him kindly on Thursday. Good. She set the pen down and turned in the chair and put her hand over his where it lay on the desk. Gideon. Yes. Nothing, she said. I like saying it. It comes out the same every time. The fire made its small sounds. Outside, the rain went over the water meadows, and the stream ran where a stream ought to run, and in the hall below the servants going by said good evening to the Duchess by name first, before anybody else's, because that was the way of the house now, and would be for as long as there was a house at all.